Well, good morning, or good afternoon, I guess, or middle of the night if you're a creepy weirdo watching this from home. Anyway, distributing and combining rational numbers. We're going to keep going with rational numbers. We're not just doing integers anymore. Now we're throwing in those ugly fractions and decimals, and we're just going back to what we've already learned with integers, and we're going to do the same process, the same steps, just with rational numbers now. So I'm going to go kind of quick. It's a review. You've already learned this process. We're just going to do it again with rationals. So if you need to pause the video to write things down, if I'm talking too fast, pause it when you need to. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to distribute. And step one, I know it's really hard for you to do, but I do not want you to let the fractions scare you, okay? So do not let the fractions scare you, which I know is hard for some of you. Some of you were taught by your elementary teacher that fractions are scary. In fact, I've heard elementary teachers tell their students that exact phrase. Fractions aren't scary, they're just numbers. Yeah, they're a little bit more complicated than a simple integer, but the good news is this year you get to use a calculator. So if you're not scared for any other reason, know that you've got a calculator that's going to help you do some of the math, all right? So step one, don't be afraid, be brave. Number two, really all number two is if you just want to cross that whole big, long, ugly sentence out and write Santa hat. Step two, after you're not scared anymore, is just to draw our Santa hat. So you need to remember that you're circling the number in front of the parentheses, which happens to be a fraction in this one, and the sign in front of it, that negative sign, don't forget it. And then we're going to draw our Santa hat. We're going to draw our arrows to show what we are distributing to, what we're going to multiply by, which some of you are still forgetting that this means multiply, that this means negative 1/2 times 6, and it means negative 1/2 times 4. On our last test, I saw quite a few people taking this number in front, and they would multiply it by the first one, and then add it to the second one, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So multiply it by both. All right, so step two, we're just going to draw that hat. And step three is just nonsense that another teacher uses. So go ahead and cross out step three. Our step three is to just actually distribute, do the math. So right here, you can just write do the math. So we're going to draw the Santa hat, and then we're going to actually do the math behind it. So I'm going to do negative 1/2 times 6. And again, this year we get calculators. So on your calculator, if you just want to put a negative sign, and then your fraction button, because our fraction is 1/2. That gives me negative 1/2, which looks exactly like my picture. And I'm going to times that by 6. I'm ignoring the n for just a minute. Negative 1/2 times 6 is negative 3. Now I need to put my n there. All right. Now, the step a lot of you forget. I've got to multiply it by the second number, my second arrow. So I'm going to do negative 1/2 again, negative 1/2. But this time I'm going to multiply it by a positive 4. I'm going to multiply it by 4, and I get minus 2. So negative 1/2 distributed becomes negative 3n minus 2. And I'm done. Hopefully it was that simple for you as well. Again, it's just like this number being an integer, but now it's not. Now it's a fraction. We just multiply the fraction instead of multiplying a 3 or a 4 or a negative 17. All right? So that's step one of our simplifying process. We know that if there's distribution to do, if there's parentheses, we have to do that first. So that right there, that covered what? 2 days of math that we did earlier this year. And we just are covering it in a couple of minutes. So hopefully you're picking that up as well. So we're going to move on to, after we distribute, we have to combine like terms. Again, a step that some of you forgot on the last test. You would make the distribution, and in this case, there are no like terms to combine. We can't combine our n's with our not n's, but in some of the problems on the test, after you distributed, there were things that you could combine and you forgot to do so. So let's just do a quick review of what that means. We can't add numbers together that aren't the same, meaning or aren't like terms. We can't put numbers that have an n with them together with numbers that don't. I can't do negative 3 minus 2 because it's not negative 3. It's negative 3n minus 2. So we can't combine those numbers. That would be my answer right there. But in this problem, I have 3/4 of a y plus 12 minus half of a y minus 6. I've got some like terms. I've got y's. Those I can combine. I can put those together. And then I have my constants, my numbers here without variables, and those I can combine as well. So really quick, we'll go through the steps and then we'll do the math behind it. So we're going to write equivalent expressions by combining like terms. So the first step here, again, some of the other teachers make this a little bit more complicated than what we do in here. Step 1 is to just eliminate double signs. So up above here, we're going to eliminate, I don't know, I think that's how you spell eliminate. We're going to eliminate double signs. We don't like having them. So what's cool about math is if we don't like it, we can get rid of it. Mathematically, you can't just make it go away, but if the math can support it, we'll get it to go away. So eliminate double signs. I've got one sign here, one sign here, one sign here. So in this problem, I don't have anything I need to eliminate. We're okay on double signs. Step 2 is the same as last time. We're going to circle each number and the sign in front of it and the variable, if there is one, attached to it. So we're going to circle each number, the sign that's in front, not the sign in the back, guys, the sign in front, and the variable attached to it. So in this problem, I've got 3/4 of a y, and even though there's not a sign in front of it, I know that it's a positive. It's like there's a plus sign there. And then I'm going to circle my other y, which has a negative 1/2 attached to it. So I'm going to make sure to circle the negative and the y with that 1/2. And then I've got a +2 and a -6. I'm not going to circle those. I could box them or underline them. I'm going to do something different because I don't want to accidentally combine them with my y's. I like to do different things for different terms. So I circled my y's. I'm going to underline my constants. Number 3, our next step, now that we've recognized what we need to combine, is just to combine them. And we're going to use a calculator. Use a calculator. Oh my gosh, that's my, oh my gosh, I get to use a calculator emoji face. Use a calculator to combine like terms. So let's do that. My like terms, I've got 3/4 of a y minus half of a y. And I can't put y on my calculator, but I can put the 3/4 and the minus a half. So on my calculator, I'm going to do my fraction button. I'm going to do 3/4, and I'm going to minus another fraction, 1/2. And when I do that, I get 1/4. So I'm left over with 1/4 y's. That's how many y's I have. And then I've got a positive 12 minus 6. You can put it in your calculator if you want, but I know that 12 minus 6, I've been doing that since like first grade. So 12 minus 6 is a positive 6. So I put plus 6 because it's a positive 6. So 1/4 y plus 6, and I can't combine my y's and my 6's because they have different terms. So that's it. I'm done. Those really scary, ugly, oh my gosh, it's a fraction, just turned into 1/4. So sometimes your fractions are going to result in a fraction. Sometimes they're going to result in an integer like they did up here. Neither one means you did it wrong. If you get an integer, great. Sometimes fractions, when you combine them, make an integer. Sometimes they don't. You can get either answer. So that's okay that we're left with 1/4. So let's move on. I'm going to do 3 of these problems with you, and then I'm going to have you do a couple of problems on your own. Okay. Now, these problems are a little bit more complicated than just distributing and combining. You have to do both. Okay. If you notice that on some of these, like this first one, I've got distribution and I have a term here at the end. So I might have to combine like terms after I distribute. So I'm going to do my distribution first. I've got negative 1/2 in front of these parentheses. So negative 1/2 times 8n and negative 1/2 times 12. You are more than welcome to put this in your calculator. I'm just going to save us a little bit of time. A negative times a positive is a negative, and 1/2 of 8 is just 4. So if you put negative 1/2 times 8 in your calculator, you'll get negative 4 n's, and then negative 1/2 times 12, a negative times a positive is a negative. Half times 12 is 6, so I get minus 6, and then I have this plus 2n left over at the end. I've got a bunch of terms here, and in fact, I've got n's right here, plus 2 of them, and then I have minus 4 n's here at the beginning. Those I can combine. I can put those together. So negative 4 plus 2, again, if you want to, put that in your calculator. Negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2 n's minus 6. Now all I have are n's and 6's, which don't go together, so I'm done with that problem. Number 2, 2.5 x's plus 4.3 x's minus 5. I don't have to distribute anything. There's no parentheses. So let's just combine our like terms. So I've got 2.5 x's, and then I have a plus 4.3 x's, and then this minus 5, which can't go with the x's, so I'm not going to circle it. So let's do this on our calculator. We haven't done decimals yet. So 2.5 x's plus 4.3 x's, 4.3, gives me 6.8 x's. So I'm going to put 6.8 x's with a minus 5 after it. Now my x's and my 5's, those don't go together, so I'm done with this problem. Number 3, it looks like I've got distribution, 3/4 times 8p plus 12, and then I have a 3/8 at the end, which means I'm probably going to have to combine like terms when I'm done. So let's distribute first, 3/4, and I'm going to draw my Santa hat to remind me that I actually need to multiply, all right? So 3/4 times 8, let's put that in your calculator for you, remind you how to do that. We do our fraction button, 3/4, and then I can just put times 8 right there off to the side, and we should get 6, and we do. We get 6 p's, because it's 3/4 times 8p, so 6p, and now I need to do 3/4 times a positive 12. So again, I'm going to put 3/4, the fraction, 3/4 times a positive 12 gives me a positive 9. So I'm going to put plus 9, because it's a positive 9, plus 3/8. So when looking at this problem, I only have one set of numbers with a p in it, but then I have a plus 9 and I have a plus 3/8. Those I can combine together. So we'll do it in our calculator, even though the math behind it might be more simple than that. I've got 9 plus 3/8, and it's going to probably give this to me as a mixed number. It's not going to give it to me as a mixed number. It gave me it as an improper fraction, which is even better because I like improper fractions. So that becomes 75/8, which I can put right here, 75/8. And in front of it, I still had a 6p. So I've got 6p out in front. I like writing my variables first. I probably should have written that before I did the math behind these. I'm sorry, but same thing. 6p plus 75/8. If you want that to be a mixed number, I don't know why, you're weird, because these are way easier to do math with, but if you turned that into a mixed number, it would just be 9 3/8. So this would be 6p plus 9 3/8. Let's stick to improper fractions whenever possible. That way, if we need to do more math with it, we can. It's a little bit easier to work with them. So that's combining and distributing with rational numbers. So you've got 3 problems down here to try on your own. Make sure you distribute with negatives. Watch those signs. Remember to not be afraid. Don't fear. You've got a calculator. It can be your friend today. And good luck. Come show me your work when you're done.